Today, let's peel back the curtain on a painful truth hidden behind the red carpet smiles, the glittering stages, and the chart-topping hits. Beneath the fame and glamour lies a story far darker than any tabloid scandal. At least 19 black R&B legends and celebrities spent their entire lives hiding a deeply personal secret, one they were never allowed to live out loud. They married, had children, and built the picture-perfect life the world demanded of them. But behind that mask was a quiet tragedy, an existence shaped by fear, shame, and isolation. They were trapped in roles written by society, forced to bury their true selves to survive in an industry that wouldn't accept them. So now, the question is, are you ready to confront these hidden stories? To see beyond the fame and hear the silent cries beneath the spotlight? Join us as we uncover the haunting, untold truths of beloved artists whose sexuality was buried in the darkest corners of Hollywood.
Wanda Sykes. Wanda Sykes, the pain behind the punchlines.
To the world, Wanda Sykes is the sharp-witted, Emmy-winning comedian whose laugh could light up any room. She's one of the most successful black comedians in America, bold, brilliant, and seemingly unshakable on stage. But behind the spotlight, behind every joke and standing ovation, was a truth she kept buried for years. In 1991, Wanda married music producer Dave Hall. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect love story, a beautiful ceremony, a promising future. But deep down, Wanda felt like a stranger at her own wedding. That night, instead of joy, she felt an eerie emptiness. Every morning after, waking up beside Dave felt like putting on a costume that didn't fit. Tight, uncomfortable, and suffocating. She wore fake smiles like armor and cracked jokes to silence the growing ache inside her.
Then came a breaking point.
It was a cool night in October 1996. Wanda had just learned that her comedy special had smashed ratings records. She returned alone to her luxury hotel suite in Beverly Hills, where city lights sparkled outside her window, but inside, the silence was deafening. She caught her reflection in the mirror, a woman smiling, but not herself. "This isn't me," she whispered, as tears welled in her eyes. In that moment, something snapped. She couldn't live a lie any longer. By 1998, the marriage ended, not with screaming matches, but with quiet heartbreak. A slow, painful liberation. Yet, the fear lingered. Would she ever be free to live as her true self? Everything changed in 2006 during a vacation, when Wanda met Alex. 2 years later, as California debated same-sex marriage, Wanda made a bold choice. She stepped onto the stage, not for a set but to come out. Her truth shook the room. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an eruption of applause. For the first time, Wanda wasn't just performing, she was finally living. And that, she says, was the biggest punchline of all: authenticity.
Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston, the angelic voice silenced by a hidden love. Whitney Houston wasn't just a superstar, she was a once-in-a-generation voice, a radiant light who defined the sound of the 80s and 90s. Her debut album shattered Billboard records, and her soaring vocals made her a household name around the globe. But behind the spotlight and applause was a painful truth she carried in silence. While the world adored her, Whitney was living a double life. On one side, she was the golden girl of pop. On the other, she was a woman forced to hide the love that made her feel whole. That love was Robin Crawford, her best friend, confidant, and, as we would later learn, the only person Whitney ever truly loved. But in July 1987, just weeks before her album Whitney would sell 25 million copies worldwide, her world cracked. At a quiet cafe in West Hollywood, her mother, firm in her faith and image, gave her an ultimatum: your career or that girl. Whitney sat frozen, torn between her future and her heart.
In the end, she chose fame.
She handed Robin a gold bracelet as a final goodbye. No words, just a silent farewell to the life she could never have. In 1992, she married Bobby Brown. To the public, it was a fairy tale union. In truth, it was a 15-year descent into chaos, marked by drugs, violence, and heartbreak. There were nights she left the stage with bruises, nights she coughed up blood after arguments, yet she still gave the world her voice. Whitney Houston died on February 11, 2012, in a Beverly Hills hotel bathtub, alone, surrounded by drugs. Her death didn't shock the world.
It devastated it.
Because it wasn't just the loss of a legend. It was the loss of a woman who was never allowed to live, or love, freely. Little Richard. Little Richard, the rock and roll legend who tried to be normal. Little Richard wasn't just a rock and roll icon, he was the explosion that lit the fire. With his electrifying stage presence, wild energy, and unmistakable voice, he didn't just make music, he made history. But behind the glitter, makeup, and screaming fans was a man at war with himself, struggling to fit into a world that never made room for who he truly was. In 1959, In the midst of a spiritual crisis and the overwhelming glare of fame, Little Richard married Ernestine Campbell. To the world, it looked like he was settling down. But in truth, he was desperately grasping for what society called normal. He hoped marriage would cleanse him of inner conflict, quiet the noise in his soul. But the stage kept calling, and with it, the life he tried to leave behind. As soon as he returned to performing, the old habits came rushing back, the late nights, the flamboyance, the secret liaisons. Then came the moment that shattered the illusion. After a high-energy show at the Apollo Theater in April 1962, police found Little Richard backstage in a compromising situation with a young man. The scandal made headlines almost immediately, and for Ernestine, it was the breaking point. By 1963, their marriage ended, quietly, without fanfare. Little Richard had tried to play the part the world demanded, but he couldn't live a lie forever. It wasn't until 1995 that he finally acknowledged his true sexuality publicly. But by then, he had spent much of his life alone, never remarrying, never settling down again. When he passed away, the only reminder of that chapter was a worn wedding photo of him and Ernestine, tucked inside his Bible, faded proof of a man who wanted love, but was never fully allowed to live it.
Marvin Gaye.
Marvin Gaye, the soul icon destroyed by a toxic love. If Little Richard struggled to hide who he truly was, Marvin Gaye lived a tragedy far more insidious, a slow, haunting death sentence disguised as marriage. The legendary voice behind some of soul music's most emotional anthems was not only battling inner demons but also trapped in a cruel, manipulative relationship with Anna Gordy Gaye, his wife, 17 years older and the sister of Motown's most powerful man. To the world, they were a power couple. Behind closed doors, Anna controlled everything: Marvin's money, his image, even his professional alliances. Their marriage wasn't built on love, it was a psychological battleground marked by betrayal, manipulation, and emotional warfare. Marvin, once a radiant soul, was slipping into addiction and despair, losing himself piece by piece. Then came the breaking point. On a bone-chilling night in March 1977, Marvin lay intoxicated and vulnerable in his Los Angeles apartment. Anna, cold and calculating, broke into his private studio. What she did next was unforgivable. She destroyed a portion of his unreleased album, his most treasured demos, by setting them on fire. Then, as if that cruelty wasn't enough, she dumped the remaining tapes into a bathtub filled with water, as if drowning every ounce of his creativity and hope. When Marvin awoke and discovered what had happened, she looked him dead in the eyes and said, with a cruel smirk, "You'll never make another hit without me, Marvin." That wasn't just a warning, it was psychological domination. A chilling reminder that he was no longer free. Years of pain, isolation, and emotional torment followed, until it all ended in tragedy. On April 1, 1984, just one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his own father. A soul silenced forever, not just by a bullet, but by the slow unraveling of a life trapped in torment.
Wendy Williams.
Wendy Williams, the glittering trap that silenced a talk show queen. After the haunting legacy of Marvin Gaye, we turn to another fallen icon, Wendy Williams. Once the fearless queen of daytime TV, Wendy made a career out of exposing secrets. Her talk show was her empire, and in it, she ruled with unmatched confidence. But behind the bright lights and bold interviews was a personal life unraveling in silence. In 1997, Wendy thought she had found her forever when she married Kevin Hunter. What seemed like love turned out to be a golden trap. Kevin wasn't a supportive husband, he was a quiet puppeteer, pulling strings behind the scenes, controlling her money, her schedule, even her voice. Wendy mistook his manipulation for devotion, and for over 2 decades, she lived in a psychological cage, masked by wigs, makeup, and laughter. Then came the breaking point. In April 2019, the tabloids exploded with photos of Kevin hand-in-hand with his longtime mistress, Sharon Hudson, cradling the child they had together. The betrayal wasn't just public, it was soul-crushing. Wendy spiraled. Found alone in her Manhattan apartment, panic-stricken and disoriented, she was rushed to the hospital and later checked into rehab to confront her growing dependence on alcohol and sleeping pills. When she returned to TV, the Wendy we knew was gone. Her once fiery presence was replaced by slurred speech, distant stares, and heartbreaking vulnerability. That marriage didn't just steal her prime years, it stripped away her health, her shine, and ultimately her legacy. What remained was a woman isolated in her pain, a legend silenced not by scandal, but by love gone toxic.
Alice Walker.
Alice Walker, love between 2 revolutions and the secret she carried. We've seen heartbreak behind the spotlight, but this next story peels back the layers of a brilliant artist torn between revolution and self. Alice Walker, the fearless voice behind The Color Purple, never shied away from exposing the raw, uncomfortable truths of race, identity, and desire. In 1967, in the thick of Mississippi's racial turmoil, she did the unthinkable. She married Melvin Rosamond Leventhal, a white Jewish civil rights lawyer. Their union was a symbol of defiance, but also a storm waiting to break. Both black and white communities condemned them. Still, they pushed forward and had a daughter, Rebecca. But love under pressure can only stretch so far. Their marriage, like many revolutions, cracked under its own weight. One humid August morning in 1976, Alice sat at her typewriter in Jackson, Mississippi, trying to write her next chapter, but the words refused to come. The sun poured through the window, but her heart felt cold. Melvin had left. No goodbyes. Just a note: you want to break all boundaries, even this home if it suffocates you. And just like that, the silence became the end. Nearly 2 decades later, Alice stunned the world again. This time, not with her pen, but with her truth. She came out as bisexual, stirring whispers of a romance with the soulful and elusive Tracy Chapman. But Alice never clung to anyone for too long. Maybe because deep down, she never let anyone cling to her. Today, she lives alone. But in every line she writes, in every truth she dares to tell, Alice Walker lives unapologetically. Proof that some women don't just survive revolutions. They are the revolution. Lee Daniels. Lee Daniels mastered the art of storytelling on screen, but real life doesn't allow for retakes. Continuing our look into personal battles behind fame, we turn to the visionary mind behind Precious and Empire. Long before the red carpets and accolades, Lee Daniels lived in a quiet war with himself. In 1992, gripped by fear in an industry that punished difference, he married a woman, not out of love, but to hide his truth. She knew deep down, but clung to denial, hoping love might rewrite reality. Then came May 1996. Just days after the premiere of one of his film projects in Los Angeles, Lee vanished. No calls. No goodbyes. Only a handwritten note found beneath his pillow. I can't act anymore. Don't live a half-life. Heartbroken, his wife packed up and left, ending a marriage built on silence. Left behind were Lee and the 2 children he had adopted, now his anchor and purpose. By the early 2000s, the weight of secrecy became too much. Lee Daniels stepped into the light, publicly coming out as gay and opening up about the lie he once lived and the fear that had nearly crushed him. But instead of rejection, he found freedom, and surprisingly, greater success. Hollywood didn't turn its back. In fact, it embraced him. And in time, so did love, when he found peace and partnership with Jaheel Fisher. Monique. Monique, the pain behind the punchlines. She made the world laugh, but behind the curtain, Monique was quietly unraveling. Like Lee Daniels, the Oscar-winning actress and comedy powerhouse carried a hidden story shaped by love, identity, and quiet anguish. In 1997, she married Mark Jackson, determined to live the life expected of her, a dutiful wife, a devoted mother. She had a child, poured herself into her family, and tried, night after night, to love the man by her side. But the harder she tried, the more distant she felt. Intimacy became a performance. Affection turned into obligation. And the only thing anchoring her to that life was the love for her child. Then, one night in March 2001, as she packed for a major show in Las Vegas, something small shattered her silence. A forgotten photo tucked inside her wallet. A woman's face. A memory she had buried deep. A name she never dared to speak. In that quiet moment, the truth hit harder than any applause ever could. She could no longer keep lying to herself. 4 years later, the marriage ended. Monique pressed on, burying herself in work, reaching the heights of Hollywood with her Oscar win for Precious. But inside, the silence remained. In 2006, she married Sidney Hicks under an open marriage, a step toward freedom, but still not the full truth. That came in 2023. On her Netflix special My Name is Monique, she finally came out as queer. No more secrets, no more shame. She spoke about loving a woman, about finding peace, and about finally giving herself permission to live and love authentically. Don Lemon. Don Lemon, a decade of hiding behind the smile. For years, Don Lemon was the picture of poise and professionalism. A polished face on America's TV screens, the golden voice of CNN delivering the news with unwavering confidence. To the public, he was the perfect gentleman. Charming, successful, and often linked to glamorous women in the tabloids. Many assumed marriage was just around the corner. But behind that carefully constructed image was a secret eating away at his soul. Night after night, Don played the role. Until one quiet evening in 2010, after wrapping a live broadcast at CNN's Atlanta studio, he came home to his upscale apartment, turned on the television, and watched himself smiling back. Something broke. He turned off the screen, sat alone in the darkness, and wept. Years of silence, shame, and pretending had caught up to him. In 2011, with the release of his memoir Transparent, Don made the courageous decision to come out as gay. It sent shockwaves through the media, and through the black community, where being openly gay in the public eye still carried heavy stigma. He was met with backlash, judgment, and even distance from former allies. But for the first time in his life, Don was no longer performing, he was finally living. And after more than a decade of quiet strength and self-discovery, love found its way in. In 2024, Don married his longtime partner, Tim Malone, proving that the truth, no matter how long it's hidden, always finds its way to the light. Da Brat. Da Brat, the fake romance and the wedding that shook hip-hop. Like Don Lemon, Da Brat, one of hip-hop's first breakout female stars, spent years hiding her truth. Bursting onto the scene in the 1990s with her signature tomboy swagger and lyrical fire, she became a trailblazer in a male-dominated world. But behind the tough exterior and platinum records was a woman quietly battling fear and shame. In the late 90s, she went public with her relationship with NBA superstar Allen Iverson. The media couldn't get enough. It looked like a power couple made for the spotlight. But the truth? It was all for show. Though she dated several men over the years, none of them ever felt real. None of them ever felt like home. Then, one hazy morning in June 2019, after a wild night out in Atlanta, Da Brat accidentally stumbled upon an old message from a woman she once loved. Someone she had buried deep in her past.
The floodgates opened.
"Enough is enough," she whispered to herself. She was tired of running. In 2020, after nearly 2 decades of silence, Da Brat finally came out, using Instagram to announce her relationship with entrepreneur Jessica Dupart. And in 2022, the two tied the knot in Georgia, sending shockwaves through the hip-hop world.
Some cheered. Some criticized.
But for the first time in her life, Da Brat didn't care. She was finally living her truth, and that kind of freedom? It's worth everything.
Tevin Campbell.
Tevin Campbell, the dreamer caught between fame and a truth he couldn't speak. Do you remember Tevin Campbell? That golden voice of 90s R&B who gave us the unforgettable hit, Can We Talk? He wasn't just a singer, he was a teenage sensation, an icon for an entire generation. But while the world fell in love with his voice, Tevin was quietly drowning in a life built on silence. As the spotlight grew brighter, Tevin was carefully packaged for public consumption, posing with women on red carpets, flashing smiles on magazine covers, and playing the role of the perfect heartthrob. But it was all an illusion. Behind the scenes, his relationships were orchestrated, his image tightly controlled to hide a part of himself that the industry wasn't ready to accept. It wasn't love, it was survival. Then came one quiet night in September 2021. Tevin stood in front of a mirror, backstage at a private show in Los Angeles. He looked at the polished version of himself staring back, dressed to perform yet feeling completely empty. He had spent decades singing to millions, but no one had ever truly heard him. That silence finally broke in 2022. After nearly 30 years of hiding, Tevin Campbell came out as gay.
It wasn't a publicity stunt.
It was a release, a quiet act of courage from a man who had sacrificed his youth, his love life, and his peace of mind to protect a truth that had long been buried. He had no headline romance, no public love story, just a voice that once captivated the world, and now finally was beginning to heal by telling his story.
Jason Collins.
Jason Collins, from false fiancé to fearless NBA trailblazer. Jason Collins wasn't just an NBA player, he was a man living a double life beneath the roar of the crowd. In 2001, he got engaged to former WNBA star Carolyn Moose. To the outside world, it was a picture-perfect love story. The press celebrated, fans smiled, and their future looked bright. But behind closed doors, Jason was drowning in silence. He didn't love her the way a man loves his bride-to-be. Every time he posed for photos or held her hand in public, it felt like a betrayal, not to her but to himself. For 8 long years, Jason lived a lie, trapped by fear, guilt, and the weight of expectations. Then came a quiet February evening in 2009. In a dimly lit Los Angeles restaurant, just before the NBA season's end, Jason finally broke. He called Carolyn and ended their engagement, a decision that stunned her, shocked the media, and left questions swirling. But the real truth wouldn't surface until 4 years later. In 2013, Jason did what no active male player in a major US sport had ever done before. He came out as gay. His revelation graced the cover of Sports Illustrated and sent ripples through the sports world. No longer hiding, Jason Collins stood tall, not just as a basketball player, but as a symbol of courage and authenticity. And standing beside him now was film producer Brunson Green, the man who helped him embrace the truth and live it proudly. Michelle Ndigiocello. Michelle Ndigiocello, a soul caught between two loves. Before the world knew her as a fearless voice in R&B, Michelle Ndigiocello was quietly fighting a battle within herself. Torn between the life she thought she should live and the one her heart truly desired. Much like NBA star Jason Collins, who found the courage to live his truth, Michelle's journey was shaped by the pain of duality. In the 1980s, before her music shook the soul of the industry, Michelle lived what seemed like a conventional life.
She loved men. She had a son.
She imagined the dream, a stable family, a life wrapped in normalcy. But beneath that surface was a storm. Her heart was split, because even as she loved men, she felt an undeniable magnetic pull toward women. It wasn't confusion. It was clarity she wasn't yet ready to face. Then came a crisp autumn morning in 1992. Inside a recording studio in New York's Greenwich Village, Michelle was laying down vocals for a deeply personal track.
Mid-song she froze.
Staring into the studio window, her own reflection staring back, she whispered, "This isn't my song." In that moment, something broke free. She didn't just change her sound, she rewrote her story. By the early 90s, she'd had enough of pretending. She came out as bisexual, a bold and risky move in a music industry still drowning in silence and stigma. She publicly embraced her love for Allison Riley, stepping into the light with raw honesty. Though welcomed by the LGBTQ+ community, Michelle carried the heavy weight of her past. The years spent in hiding, the loneliness of secrecy, the fear of not being accepted. But in choosing to live her truth, she didn't just liberate herself. She gave voice to countless others navigating the same storm.
Karamo Brown.
Karamo Brown, the painful path to becoming himself. While others wrestled with the duality of love, Karamo Brown, known for his role on Queer Eye, was silently battling a deeper war within himself, the fight to live his truth. In the early 2000s, as his career began to blossom, Karamo was in a committed relationship with a woman and had a young son, Jason. To the outside world, he had it all: love, a family, a future. But behind closed doors, a storm was brewing. He couldn't ignore the truth any longer. He was attracted to men. It wasn't a sudden realization, but when it hit, it shattered the life he thought he was supposed to want. One rainy November night in 2003, after gently putting Jason to sleep in their Philadelphia apartment, Karamo sat alone, staring at the engagement ring on his finger. The weight of pretending became unbearable. With a trembling voice, he called his partner and told her the truth: he was gay. The breakup was heartbreaking, but necessary. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the beginning of his real life. In 2004, Karamo took a leap of faith and came out publicly on MTV's The Real World, Philadelphia. It was a bold move that came with emotional scars, rejection from family, confusion, and deep loneliness. Later, his engagement to director Ian Jordan would also end, forcing him to confront an even deeper truth: he couldn't truly love someone else until he fully accepted and loved himself.
Angelica Ross.
Angelica Ross, the painful journey behind the spotlight. Angelica Ross wasn't just a breakout star from Pose. She was a revolutionary voice, blazing a trail for LGBTQ+ rights in an industry that rarely makes space for truth. But long before the red carpets and applause, Angelica lived in silence, caught in the cruel space between who the world saw and who she truly was. In the early 2000s, she appeared to be living the dream, in a picture-perfect relationship with a man, admired by everyone around them. But inside, Angelica was unraveling. She was playing a role far more painful than any she'd ever auditioned for, the role of someone she was not. Her heart knew the truth, but her reflection felt like a stranger. Then came a moment that shattered the illusion. One morning in September 2009, preparing for a major Hollywood photo shoot, Angelica sat in front of the mirror, applying her makeup like always. But this time, the smile wouldn't come. Instead, tears welled up as she stared into her own eyes and finally whispered the truth she had buried for so long: "I can't keep pretending." She walked out of that studio and called the man she loved, not to hurt him, but to set them both free. Her love was real, but the life she was living wasn't. That phone call marked the end of one chapter, and the terrifying beginning of another. In the following years, Angelica stepped into her truth, coming out publicly as a transgender woman. It was a brave declaration that came with heartbreak. She faced backlash from society, judgment from loved ones, and countless closed doors. But she also found something else: freedom. Angelica Ross didn't just transition into her true self, she transformed pain into purpose. Even as love remained elusive and the road ahead uncertain, she stood tall. Not just for herself, but for everyone who's ever felt unseen. Her story is a reminder that the most powerful kind of beauty isn't found on screen. It's found in the courage to live your truth, no matter the cost. Raven Simone. Raven-Symoné, a journey of hidden love and hard-won freedom. Do you remember Raven-Symoné? The bubbly Disney star who lit up our screens from the moment she was a child. Known for her quick wit, infectious charm, and undeniable talent, Raven became a household name, but behind the scenes, she was quietly wrestling with a truth she didn't yet have the courage to share. In the 2000s, while the world saw her smiling beside her boyfriend, playing the part of a picture-perfect couple, Raven felt like she was living someone else's life. She cared for him, yes, but there was always something missing. A piece of her heart she couldn't show. The fear of being outed, the pressure to fit in, and the weight of fame made it nearly impossible for her to live authentically. Then one night in August 2012, everything changed. After stepping off the red carpet at a glittering Los Angeles event, Raven returned home, exhausted. In her mailbox was a faded, handwritten letter from a childhood friend. Just one question was scrawled across the page: "Are you truly happy?" That question shattered the mask she had been wearing for years. The very next day, she picked up the phone, ended her relationship, and made a promise to herself: no more hiding. In 2013, Raven made headlines when she publicly came out on Twitter, writing, "I can finally be free to love who I want to love." It was more than just a tweet, it was a declaration of liberation, not only for herself but for countless others watching.
She faced judgment. She faced pushback.
But through it all, Raven found the one thing she had long been denied: peace. Love came, first with model AZ Marie Livingston, and later with Miranda Mayday, the woman she married in 2020. Today, Raven-Symoné stands not just as a star, but as a symbol of strength, authenticity, and the freedom that comes when you finally live your truth.
Frank Ocean.
Frank Ocean, the painful journey of choosing truth over love. Now let's dive into the story of an artist who gave up love, and a piece of himself, for the sake of living his truth. Frank Ocean, one of the most soulful voices of his generation, has serenaded the world with smooth, heartfelt hits. But behind the music lies a quiet storm of heartbreak and inner struggle. In the early 2000s, Frank was just starting his career and appeared to be in a relationship with a woman, fueling industry buzz and public curiosity. But deep down, he knew that wasn't where his heart truly belonged. His first real love had been with a man when he was just 19, a relationship he had to keep hidden from the world. The pressure from society, and the often unwelcoming music industry, forced him into silence. Then came a quiet morning in April 2012. Inside a dim Los Angeles recording studio, Frank sat staring at a blank screen, struggling to write lyrics that felt honest. As the sunlight poured through the window, memories of that secret love washed over him. In that moment, he made a bold decision: no more hiding. He rewrote the song, pouring his truth into every line. Just months later, he published a letter on Tumblr, raw and poetic, coming out as bisexual to the world. It was a seismic moment, not just in music, but in hip-hop culture. While many applauded his honesty, Frank still carried the ache of love lost, of stories he never got to finish. Behind his calm voice and thoughtful words is a man who chose truth over comfort, and paid the price with a heart that may never fully heal.
Niecy Nash.
Niecy Nash, the third marriage, and the love story she never thought she'd tell. Among the names on this list stands Niecy Nash, one of Hollywood's most radiant stars, known for her sharp wit and infectious charm. But behind the laughter was a woman quietly battling an identity she was too afraid to embrace. In 1994, at just 24, Niecy married Don Nash, a kind-hearted pastor. Together, they raised 3 children and embodied the picture-perfect American family. But behind closed doors, something was missing. She wasn't unhappy, but she wasn't whole either. She lived for others, never for herself. When their marriage ended in 2007, there was no scandal, no shouting match, just a quiet surrender.
They hadn't betrayed each other.
They had simply become strangers sharing a roof, living separate lives in silence. Her second marriage to Jay Tucker, an even-tempered electrical engineer, began in 2011. On the surface, it was stable, but Niecy still wasn't free. She was drowning in expectations, hiding a truth she had buried since childhood, a magnetic, unshakable attraction to women. Then came March 2020. Days after announcing her divorce from Jay, Niecy sat at her kitchen table, emotions unraveling. Jay gently asked if she was okay. Niecy met his eyes, her voice trembling, and said, "I can't keep pretending. I've never forgotten her, Jessica Betts." And just like that, something inside her shifted.
The mask dropped.
The real Niecy emerged. When she married Jessica later that year, it wasn't a coming-out moment. It was a love story finally told. She didn't need to explain it, label it, or justify it. For the first time, when Niecy walked the red carpet holding hands with her wife, her smile wasn't for the cameras, it was for her. Because now, she was finally living in truth.
Cheryl Swoops.
Cheryl Swoops, the queen of the court trapped in an invisible cage. Now we reach the story of a true legend, Cheryl Swoops, a trailblazer in women's basketball and a queen on the court. But behind her flawless game and record-breaking career was a woman quietly fighting a battle few ever saw. In 1995, at just 24 years old, Cheryl married basketball coach Eric Jackson. To the world, they were the picture of success. A beautiful family.
A rising star. A son named Jordan. And Cheryl?
She was the shining face of the WNBA, a champion on the hardwood and seemingly in life. But when the arena emptied and the lights dimmed, Cheryl sat in silence, questioning who she really was. The trophies piled up, but so did the emptiness. One night in March 1999, fresh off a victory in Houston, she walked into her home, looked at her championship trophy, and felt absolutely nothing. The applause couldn't drown out the voice inside her anymore. She realized her marriage wasn't just falling apart, it was built on a version of herself she could no longer pretend to be. 4 years after tying the knot, Cheryl made the painful decision to divorce. But her real turning point came in 2005. At age 34, she stepped into the light, no longer hiding. In a groundbreaking interview with ESPN the magazine, Cheryl came out publicly, becoming one of the first professional basketball players to do so. The move was bold, brave, and history-making.
But it came at a cost.
Contracts were quietly pulled. Sideways glances turned cold. Whispers followed her wherever she went.
Still, Cheryl pressed on.
She found love with Alyssa Scott, a woman who saw her, loved her, and never asked her to change. The relationship, however, couldn't withstand the pressure of outside judgment. But through it all, Cheryl discovered something far more powerful than romance. She found herself. Behind the glitz and glory, there are untold stories. Stories of people forced to play roles just to survive. Marriages formed to silence suspicion. Smiles worn to hide silent cries.
Was Cheryl wrong?
Or was she simply doing what she had to in a world that wouldn't let her be free? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you're ready to uncover more truths that Hollywood tried to bury, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications.